everybody. I'm Jeffy with the Williamson County Public Library and the Special Collections Department. Our Special Collections Department works frequently with our local authors, and it's my pleasure to have Talbot Harlin and Clay Harlin here today to talk about their new book that features on our local area for Hollinsdale Farms. I hope y'all all have the opportunity to visit there, and I thank you for coming here this morning to listen to our guest speakers.
Thank you. Sincere thanks for coming. I'm not really sure what we expected when we came here. Certainly not only a couple of empty seats. Thank you for the library for putting this on, and Dad for following through on this and giving us this opportunity. I won't do a show of hands. We're going to keep the talk general, conversational, to speak to folks that may have read the book or not read the book, or may just be generally interested in the mistakes we made with doing a book, so you can learn from that. So if you have read the book, thank you. If you haven't, and if you're interested, I'll tell you where you can find it later. As testimony to what our real intent for writing this book, not to sell books. We just wanted to tell the story. We didn't bring any books, so I can tell you where to get them later if you're really interested. But we just wanted to talk about it. Thank you to my mother Faye for being here. If she wasn't here, I definitely wouldn't be here, and I'm not sure Dad would even still be alive. And my wife Ashley is here as well with my little daughter Colette, who may or may not be able to hold it together silently for now. And then my in-laws are back there as well. And then all of you as well, thank you for coming. Our intent is just to kind of make a few points as we go along. Why we wrote the book, really the genesis of it, and what we wanted to get out of it, and the story we wanted to tell, what was important to us to tell the book. You can decide for yourself whether we get that point across in the book, but at the very least, I'd like to make sure we get those points out there today. And just leave you maybe with a better understanding of what the park is and what it meant. And Jeffy, apologies for correcting you. It is Harlinsdale Farm singular. I think the Maryland Farms era in this area and other things leaves the S just to be appropriate. It's Harlinsdale Farm. Not a big deal if you want to change that up. And the park that's there now is obviously available to you David was talking about taking his dog there this morning. And that kind of segues into what I wanted to say at the beginning was, why we wrote the book. If we had written this book, Dad, if we had to write this book in 2005, would have taken on a little bit more of a resentful tone, probably. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of pain that comes from us from the fact that, I write in the book that it never occurred to me, if any of you were here for the book signing, you'll remember that if I talk about something that has an emotional tingle in my heart, I get a little choked up, so I'm gonna try not to do that. But I did write that when I left Franklin in 1999, it never occurred to me that the farm wouldn't be here for me and my children and our future. And so there was about a 20-ish year period where that's kind of how I thought about it. Until we really started working through here. And then, that's when I realized it is still there. And that's the part of it that is enduring, and the legacy of which that you all can enjoy. But the part that you didn't have was the people that made it work and the stories that came along with it. So that's what we really, selfishly, we wanted to get those down as the generations move on. Dad fell off a ladder like 3 years ago. We thought we'd lost him. My father-in-law kind of put the emphasis to, it's kind of now or never. You're taking it for granted that people know these stories. They don't. And so the story of the people who worked on the farm, to us, was always much more important than the horses or Tennessee walking horses of the industry in general. And so there was so much richness there that enriched our lives that we wanted to make sure we got down. And in doing so, it was sort of a therapy process for us, because the sort of bitterness and the resentment melted away to where I think by the end of it, Dad was probably much closer to this place than I was before I started writing the book, but it landed in a place of just pure gratitude. Does that ring a bell? Does that ring true to you, Dad?
Yes. Each of us here in this room come from a place where we stand on the shoulders
See where I get it?
I reread the whole book last night just to get this out of my system, and I didn't. None of us plans where we're going to be born, who we're going to be born to, and where we're going to live. But that's where we are, and that's what shapes us and forms us, and we stand on the shoulders of those people, whether it be friends, whether it be family, whether it be co-workers. We don't control that like we think we might, but they form us, they shape us. And this book Harlinsdale is obviously known for amazing horses. We had 200 of our own. We run 400 and 500 through there in the summertime. It was a lot of labor-intensive work, but this book is not about the horses. It's about people that formed us, that gave us our worldview. Like it or not, that's how we came out of the factory. We were formed by these people. And so it does ping a lot of heartstrings. And I had 12 first cousins. None of them decided to go in the horse business. I'm the only one that did, and that's why we're writing this book. And so when we were writing this book, we didn't let anybody know we were writing this, because one, we didn't think we were writing a book. We thought we were just writing some memoirs. And he said, we got 60,000 words. We got a book. So then we had another problem, but I'll let him get into that in a minute. But there were so many stories and so many people's generations. I didn't know my great-grandfather, but I knew my grandfather. But by the time I spent my whole life working for my grandfather, I knew my great-grandfather. And he used to say, you're just like him. I was like, I hope not, But it's that bridge of family connections and stories. And yeah, ours may have grown a few legs. They may have grown a few parts over the years and gotten bigger and better than we really anticipate them, especially when it gets 100 degrees outside and you think it wasn't as much fun, But anyway, I want to give it back to him, to give him a chance to kind of go through the motions of how we got there. But it was about right before that fall, and I crashed and wound up in an ICU. When I was getting my wits together, he looked at me and said, Dad, we're going to have to write these stories down before you're gone. Because I thought, well, this is not encouraging. They already had me halfway there, and so, but it was kind of one of those times. But we had, on my 70th birthday in April, before that happened in August, we sat around with the guys that helped us write this book. And we must have sat around for 2 hours and just reminiscing stories. And that's when he and my nephew, Bill Harlin, who's now the principal at Brentwood Middle, who spent a lot of time with us at the farm, said, we got to get these down. And so that was the driving force behind this. And so my mind is shutting down. So I'll let you talk a while, and then I'll pick it back up.
That's very good. Thank you. So a little bit, I'll just walk through the process, because it actually makes sense in the way, if you've read the book or if you choose to read the book. It's not necessarily chronological, and it's not even written in the order in which I wrote the stories. So that actually brings in, if you're ever interested in writing a book, its own challenges when it comes to editing and consistency, to remember whether or not, it's like reading the Old Testament. Like, I think I've already said that. You did. Do I need to say that again? I don't. So that is a challenge in and of itself. But what you might find more interesting is just the way that through writing it, how my opinions on things changed, and how you suddenly realize that some of these people, like Dad was saying, one of the reasons I think I became even more determined to not just, once we had something that at least one other person other than me and him was like, I think these are pretty good. Okay, well, maybe somebody else will think it's worth reading, is if you just let Harlinsdale stand the way it is, you're gonna see a park, you're gonna see a bunch of stories about champion walking horses, and you're never gonna hear about Homer Ford. You're never gonna hear about Rocky Jones. You're never gonna hear about Alfred Perkins. And to me, those are the giants that should be on the sides of the stalls in the barn that you should remember, that you should be donating money for to renovate the barn. I mean, those are the men who shaped our lives, and we shaped their lives. And so just a wealth of stories there that we wanted to get out. But it is interesting to think back on the process of, I'm just opening to the prologue right now, and I even just reading it right now, if I was going to read it to you, which I'll try, there's a bit of bitterness in it, which is funny, because when you get to the end, the elegy, which there's zero chance I will read to you today without getting choked up, it's sweet. And so you can kind of see the process that we went through as we told these stories, and they began to change our heart and how we, at least for me, that's probably important to say at this point. The entire book is in my voice. 70% of the stories are Dad. I worked there for 4 summers. I mean, come on, the place was there for 100 years. Go ahead.
Time out. We were both writing stories. He said, Dad, can you put this in a different voice? And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay.
So
this is important.
Said, we quit doing this. I said, you just take it.
I'll let myself off the hook right now. This is the second paragraph in the prologue. We will do our best to tell these stories as we remember, as we live them, and as they have been told to us. Some of it, most of it, will be smooth and polished with time and perspective. Some of it will be slightly embellished and devoid of the less palatable details. Some of it is probably not completely true, but none of it is made up. And that's the place that, at least with a memoir, I can say, I don't know, that's the way we remember it. I didn't make this up. And that's what's important, because that's how it affected us. And so a lot of what Dad was very good at digging back and finding context to things that I couldn't have possibly had, or honestly, even just like giving grace to a story that might have been told to me in a way that was meant solely to poke fun at someone, and for him to say, hey, if we leave that as his legacy, he actually struggled with a lot of things. He was actually a really nice person. So that sort of context, that if I had just retold his stories without him being a part of it, you would have had a different view of things. But 70% of the material is his, in terms of his memories and the stories that he lived. When it came time to just literally physical time I was able to devote to this, and I guess I'm just better at taking stories and making them sound a little bit more conversational. The voice that I was using, we agreed, was just the proper voice to use. So that's when I just kind of took over, and I took his stories and rewrote them. So if you read it, you'll notice it's all generally in my voice, with a few flashbacks to scenes of his childhood that I could not have possibly been there to hear the dialogue that I completely made up. But the point of them is to tell the story and ring true to how it would have been there when he was there. And so you'll notice a little bit of that in there as well. The other thing that when we say, like, we don't want it to just stand as a, like, the farm in and of itself, of course, was a horse farm. It provided a livelihood for a bunch of people. But the fact that a lot of those folks, like you said, were going to not have a voice to leave their legacy bothered me. Rocky Jones is one that comes to mind. Very influential person in my life, who died completely alone and anonymous. And so that was a tragedy for me to think about. And I know there's plenty of folks like that Dad could think about. So there's the other challenge that came when I wanted to make sure I honored certain people, and Dad wanted to as well. And I wanted to honor my father as well, is being careful with people's legacy and what you say about them, and being honest, but not to the point that, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Not to embellish their legacy, but certainly for people who are influential to us, but just they're never gonna have a chance to tell their story. There's a responsibility and a weight that comes with that. So some of the stories as I wrote them, I had to go back and review them, and is that really how I want people to think about Rocky? Is that how Rocky would want people to think about himself? And some of those times, those two things are not the same. I think actually, I'll be honest, if you've never read it and you understand the character of Rocky Jones from the book, he would probably get up and walk out of this room right now because I said his name out loud in front of a bunch of people. He would have never come in. No, zero chance. So that's also, there's a little bit of I'm taking a little bit of license with, he would have never told his story, but people need to hear it. So as far as the rest of the process of making it, I literally started writing these on my laptop. I travel for a living, so just sitting in a hotel room on my Apple Notes, sharing a few stories. The first story I actually wrote was not called a June morning, 1995. It was just called the Day of Days. And my first day on the farm. And I shared that with Dad. And then he shared with me his story of his first day on the farm. And that's where it occurred to us both, like, there's so many similarities here. And that was the sort of original idea of reaching back and saying, look, all these stories have continuity through the generations. And thanks to our editor, we changed this, I think. Maybe you would like this title better. It was originally called Walking in Our Grandfather's Dreams, which has it's a little bit too cute with the walking horses and the grandfathers, but and it was also a tongue twister and didn't fit very well on a book cover. But that was my original thought. And then the truth is, when maybe this is worthwhile for anybody who's thinking about writing a book, I wouldn't fall in love with your title I wouldn't even fall in love with what you think the book's about until you're done. And maybe that doesn't apply to a novel, but certainly for a memoir of your life. Because that's where we landed was the end of the book, which I say, what we had left was the part that can't be sold. When everything was gone, like, what we had left was the most valuable part, which sounds cliche to say, but everything Dad said earlier, the most valuable thing that we got from the farm had nothing to do with, you could have taken the horses and replaced them with any other breed of horse or cows or anything else, and it didn't matter. It was the people and the experience of working there that I think shaped our lives. So I can go further down that road, but Dad.
Okay, hand me that book just a minute. My father, after he passed away, I was going through his desk, and you learn a lot about people when you look at their personal desk. A lot of cartoons and a lot of other things they cut out and whatever, but he had written a statement about his father at his death. And it just really, really hit me, because it goes back to what I said a minute ago. We are formed by other people. And the lady that edited our book, what was her name?
Anna Floyd.
Anna Floyd. She teaches at...
she's an administrator at Franklin Classical School. Her company's called the Peacock Quill.
If we hadn't gotten her, I don't know where we would have been. She was wonderful. She didn't try to change the flavor of the book, who we were, or anything else. She really captured it in her mind, and then helped us guide it through there, and didn't change a lot, where we didn't want to give it to family to look at until we were done. Because if you've ever dealt with family, they'll have all kinds of comments and things you ought to add and take out. And we didn't want to go there, because we flirted with that once, and then I said, shut it down, So we wanted to keep it a secret. But she was raised up in a family that had a concrete business. And full of colorful people. This is before wokeism, and you could, get away with saying things that were cute and funny, because nobody took you serious. They didn't take themselves serious, but she was just saying, I could have taken that book and put myself in there with my family's business. That's what we wanted to convey. Many of you know that. Many of you have had situations like that. You're thinking, wow, I wish I could share those stories. That's all we did. And their memories. He's the one that got me started reading memoirs instead of history. Memoirs of Confederate and Union generals, or this or that. And you get a flavor totally different than a historical written biography, which is so much better. I learned so much from reading Grant's memoir. I thought, man, this guy really had a lot of feeling and cared about a lot of people. Lee's. And don't anybody shake now. Sherman, I really have a lot of admiration for him. Grew up in the South, worked in Atlanta, taught at LSU. But then how all those things combined formed those people. Okay, now this ain't about Civil War. My mother's family fought for the Confederate side. My father's family were smart people, and they fought for the Union. And they won the war. So let's just leave it at that. All right, but anyway, getting back to this whole idea, my father, he valued his family. He valued history. He valued photographs. If my grandmother did too. If we didn't have those things, I'd have no connections. And how important those are. Everybody used to get mad at my grandmother because she wanted to take pictures. And my father would get so upset and so angry, no kidding, My daughter found a picture where he's got his finger on my shoulder, but he's actually shooting a bird. Because he's so tired of pictures, come on, take the picture, So, see, why did he do that? Don't know. But those memories of things are so important. Those are the threads that we keep, and we keep moving on to our children. I met with my grandson yesterday, and we talked for maybe 2 hours. He's getting ready to go to University of Kentucky. And we were reminiscing and talking, and I was able to reach back and grab what my father and my grandfather and other people had said, and I pulled it forward and gave it to him. Here's what I was going to read, and I'm sorry. I'm meandering. See, when you have 2 concussions, you can get away with things. I mean, I do phases. Sometimes I talk like I'm talking through Jell-O. My processes are slow. But it says, what did my father give to me? Not an inheritance, but a heritage. A sense of sportsmanship that goes far beyond the playing field. He taught me to play fair in everything and to hate bullies. If you knew my dad, he was a little guy. But buddy, you didn't want to mess with him, he would stand up to you. I remember being at a football game, University of Kentucky playing Vanderbilt. And I was with him, and the guy behind us was just railing on. He turned around with his umbrella and stuck it in the guy's right here and said, if you don't shut up and sit down, I'm going to put this in you. And I'm like, what? But he was a very calm, quiet guy, But anyway, he said he had something in him that was passed down to him about sportsmanship. It goes beyond the playing field. He taught me to play fair in everything, to hate bullies. He taught me good taste and good manners, which have no price but great worth. He opened my mind when I was very young to a love of learning. My grandfather didn't graduate from any major university. He went to Western Kentucky, which was just a business school then, but they were all very smart people. My grandfather came out of the Depression era, but was able to, because he worked on a farm with his siblings and his father, his mother died when he was 2 years old, so he was a single dad on a farm in Gumaya, Kentucky. But out of his training and learning, he was able to come to Nashville, start a business, and during the Depression era, buy a huge amount of tracts of land, put them together for a farm, which I'm embarrassed to say how much he paid for it because it wasn't much, and established all this for us. And that's what I'm trying to recall, and just Harlinsdale for me was a place I could go down and connect with my family, and no matter what was bothering me, whether I was in business or at school, or I could turn down that lane. And everything was okay. My life, all of a sudden became ordered again because I knew the people down there, I knew where their compass was always pointing and where they would point me. And it was just such a beautiful experience. I can remember going down there with my dad and just frustrated in business about something. And he said, son, how many days can you live at a time? I said, seriously? About his age. And I said, 1. He said, well, good. He said, why don't you do today what you can do today? And worry about tomorrow. I thought, well, that sounds biblical. But it was just things like that. It was my compass. It was a place I could go. It still is. I can go down there and everything's okay. You have places like that. I'm way off track.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
No, that's good, Ed. Before I go any farther, because I could go on into that, the meaning of a lot of this too, but I just want to kind of get a feel for what interests the folks that came today. Are there any questions, anything about that anybody wants us to expound upon? Yes, sir.
Just curious, how long did it take you from the time you started your book to get to the end of it?
So I wrote the first, which is actually the second chapter in the book, but that's the first story I wrote in October of 22. And we had our book launch, book signing, whatever, in September of 24.
Yep.
So now it's not linear. Have you read the book by chance? Okay, if anybody has read the book, there's a story in there called Tyrannus Equus Rex, which is a good snapshot of the sophomoric humor of my brain. I wrote that story like one afternoon between shifts at work. Then some of the stories would take me a month or more, you know what I mean? And then getting them all down, and then we would work through them, and he always had a lot of good points, like I said earlier, like, okay, that's a funny story, but you realize how that makes that guy look. I'm like, yeah, oh, yeah, okay. So polishing them in here and there, and agreeing on the voice and things like that took a little bit of time. The editing process took a little bit of time. And then, so I was probably ready from what I considered to be like a printable manuscript in about April of that year, of 24. Then the actual process of producing it into this, took the better part of like that summer. So writing it, to break that down, like writing it probably a year, probably 6 months of like revisiting it and editing it. And then about 5 to 6 months of the detail of the production. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much. So most of what you put into the book is actually what you've written, as opposed to documentation that you've received in your research on some of your earlier family members.
True statement. Everything in this book,
We interviewed some
the source
people.
material either came from my memories, his memories, or Dan Ford and Johnny Hafter.
And Jim Hayes.
And Jim Hayes.
Who
Yeah, he
read-
did. That's true. He did have
On
a
our
good...
website, harnsdalefarm.com, Jim Hayes, who some of you may know, he's the one who was responsible for most of the radio stations in Franklin. All right, his father was the manager of Harlinsdale. He was my cousin. But Jimmy has written a history of how it all came to be, not a memoir. And it's free. It's on our harlinsdalefarm.com site. And you can go and read it, and there's pictures that associated with everything. But we put that in there just so that was one of our sources.
Yeah, whenever it came to, that's a sort of, you can give yourself a little bit too much freedom, I guess, when you adopt that mindset of a memoir. Like, I don't know if it's true, it's how I remember it. Well, there's certain things that are actually matters of record. And I made sure to look those up, and Jimmy Hayes, his history was very instrumental in that, and making sure there's some other researchable things that we could find out and say, okay, that didn't actually happen in that year, it had to have been another year. So we either need to muddy the waters around that fact or correct it, if you will. But in terms of like, every single story was either an audio interview between him and Dan Ford, that I pulled out a lot of dialogue and finished the thoughts for them in some ways, because I wasn't there for the interviews and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to have to coach Dan on what his memories of things were. Or Dad wrote a lot of stories too. And initially he was spending a lot of time writing them as if they were ready to be read. And I once I realized, like, I'm basically rewriting them, just stream of conscious. They don't need to be proofread or in any even sentence format. And I would rewrite them, I guess, in my voice. Outside of that, there are, other than that quote he just attributed to his father, and then there's some video interviews of my grandfather that I didn't actually watch for this. There weren't any written stories. Nobody had written these things down. They would just tell them in the hallway of the barn before we picked up a pitchfork and went to work. You just hear them and you'd hear them and you hear them. I remember the story I don't even know who was the first person that would tell it. You would hear the story and you would laugh along like you remembered it, like you were there or something, but then you're like, no, I just remember the story. And it was his grandfather, Clay, up in Gamaliel, Kentucky. And I guess he used to go coon hunting a lot. And he would, roll up tobacco leaves in little balls, put them in a pouch. And like you might do like a dip of tobacco or something and would chew them while they were hunting. And there was a man who was always bumming his tobacco leaves from him. I'm telling you the story like I was there. I just heard this like 100 times. Well, one night, I guess, he got tired of this guy bumming tobacco from him. He knew he was going to ask for one. So he looked down and there was some rabbit scat or deer scat or something on the ground. So he just picked one up and just had it handy when this guy came and asked him to bum a chew. And he's like, hey. So I would laugh along to stories like that when I was a kid, never knowing that the subject of the story was about my great-great-grandfather. I didn't know that until I wrote these stories and got this together. That was the side benefit for me, was ordering these things. All the stories I've been hearing, like, okay, that was Clay Harlan. That was my great-great-grandfather. Now it makes sense. I thought they were talking about some guy they know, like that's still alive. The guy's been dead for 50 years, and they're still telling the story. And that's where they come from. Nobody wrote them down. And it really was Tom Ryan, my father-in-law, who I think made it clear to me, like, not that we are special, but that these stories are different. This isn't normal. It's not normal to have this kind of wealth of history just rolling around in your head. You need to write this down or it's going to be lost. And I'm glad we did. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Kind of interested in the history of Harlinsdale Farm. How big a farm was it? And what? And what percentage of it exists today?
Okay. When my grandfather and my grandmother Luella, who was from Nashville, they had 4 boys, my father being the oldest, and they were living on Kirkwood Avenue in Nashville, where Melrose is. Oh, that was the end of civilization right there, and then you drove to Franklin. Well, they would come out to Willow Plunge in the summertime, which was it was a nice swimming area. Yeah, that was before they put chlorine in pools, that sort of thing. But it was a spring-fed place out here off of Lewisburg Pike. So they would drive and see these farms, and they realized they wanted to get their boys 4 boys. If you raised boys, I raised 1, but I had 2 girls. It kind of kept things in balance there. But 4 boys can be pretty rough, So he wanted to get them out to a farm, let them learn what it means to be a farm. So he'd be on a farm. So and they were already riding ponies and horses and that sort of thing. So they began to look for land, and he would come out here, and they would drive down Hillsborough Road and drive down Franklin Road into Franklin, and just check out sites and farmland. And my grandmother thought he had bought a place was going to buy a place on Hillsborough Road. Well, he came down here, and he was in close touch with a banker in Nashville who was telling him all these properties because the Allen Stove Works went bankrupt, everything else around it folded. So you had, where he was looking, you had Miles Manor Gardens and Miles Manor Court. One of those, I can't remember which, hadn't sold the first lot. Miles Manor Gardens had sold some. That's right across from the factory. And then it had a huge house. It was the Franklin Country Club. It was sitting there vacant because they went bankrupt, along with everybody else. And it was sitting there. It had a little fire that went on in the kitchen, and it was sitting dormant. So they thought it hadn't sold. And the land behind it, the lots behind it that were supposed to be developed. And then you had, right beside it, you had the power plant that TVA put out of business that ran the trolley line from Nashville, trolley line that ran up until 1946 behind the farm there to Nashville. And you had that building sitting there, the Tennessee Phosphate Company owned it. And then you had Allendale subdivision, which had 5 houses or 6 houses on it. And it was bankrupt. And so you had all these lots owned by the bank, and you had a few individuals that owned those houses, but they wanted to get rid of them. And then you had Mr. Brown's farm, Sandy Brown, who was on north of there, going towards Spencer Creek. Spencer Creek bordered it, the Harpeth River behind. It was sitting there. He was still in it, but he didn't own it. The bank owned it. So my grandfather got to inquiring about all those pieces of land, not telling my grandmother. And so he bought the first property, was the old country club, which is the antebellum home sitting there in Miles Manor, Winslow Court. Winslow Road is a horseshoe road. It's half of it's one and half of it's the other. It sits right across from the factory. You can pull down there. It's a big old house. Looks like the White House. That's what I thought when I was a kid, man, this looks like the White House. But they bought it, and it was an old home, built in 1824, I've heard 1834, but it was Dr. Manny lived there, and then his children married a Bowman, and that's where we got all the Bowman property around Franklin. Anyway, he bought that place and took my grandmother in 1935. He drove her down to Franklin and said, I want to show you something. And he pulled up in there and he showed her that old house. And he said, what do you think about it? She said, I wouldn't have it if you gave it to me. And he said, well, it's yours, I bought it. That's kind of the way he did things. And I don't know how well that worked out for him, but they were married forever. So anyway, but it was a big house and they had plenty of room for get away from each other. So, which she did talk about when they started redoing the house, so they pulled the siding off the walls and snakes and stuff would fall out of the walls. And so it did kind of, it took a lot of work to get that done. So they got that house finished. In the process, he was buying up land as it goes along. And so when they moved in, Harlinsdale Farm was that house. There was a barn right next to it that was an old mule barn. And they began farming there. And then they began to buy other pieces along, he and his brother, Alex. They were in business together, started buying up pieces. And then his brother Alex in the end of the 40s, or about 44 or 45, somewhere in there, I can't remember which, he bought up Riverbend. So you had, from the Farnsworth family. So you had the farm going from Harpeth River here to Spencer Creek, so it was 300 acres. Huge. So in about 1956, my great uncle Alex his brother had a heart attack, and he decided he was going to move back to Nashville. So that he sold Riverbend to the Lancasters, we got Lancaster subdivision from there, but Harlinsdale Farm shrunk to 200 acres. So we had 200 acres, plus we had a farm in Leaper's Fork, which one side sat on the trace right past Garrison Road. We had that right side and the left side, but the trace ran through part of that. And that's in the book, it talks about some of that. So Harlinsdale morphed into a lot, and then we rented a lot of land, because when you have 500 head of horses run through your place, you got to have 5 acres per horse to feed them, So anyway, to answer your question, that was a long answer. We built the barn. They finished the barn opened it up for business the day after Pearl Harbor. And it's funny, we're getting ready, Friends of Franklin Parks, organization I'm part of, and they're here today, Torrey Barnhill and crew is back here. It started to renovate the old barn 13 or 14 years ago. We have an event called Raise the Roofs every year. That barn is going to be opened up at the event this year. It's been totally renovated, and you own it, Franklin. The city of Franklin's going to love it, because it's going to be beautiful. You can walk through it. You'll have artifacts and things in there about the history of the horses and the people, and you can go enjoy it along with the rest of the farm. So, just putting in a plug for Friends of Franklin Parks.
Well, one allied question. Was it ever a non-horse farm?
No. My grandfather in 1935, his 4 boys rode American saddlebreds, really pretty gaited horses. But the walking horse was already a breed, but not registered. And that's kind of what he grew up with in southern Kentucky, northern Tennessee. Walking horses are a combination of Morgans, standardbreds, American saddlebreds, and it came from after the Civil War. A lot of your soldiers got to keep the horses from their cavalries and take them home. So you got a lot of mix that came in here. Morgans were very popular in this area, a lot like them. But walking horses were established in 1935. My dad and his brother Tom went with my grandfather to Lewisburg, and the former governor of the state was there and some other people. Then they formed the official breed Tennessee walking horse. So he got started pushing horses. Now, we did have cattle, Hereford cattle, and for a long time until genetically the Herefords got hit with what was called dwarfism in their cattle. And so we finally just got out of that and got rid of all the herds. But we did have 2 big auction sales every year of cows and horses, but that was before I can remember it. And then we also raised a lot of crops. But my grandfather, you have to remember, he's born in 1886. His nephew, Harlan Hayes, was born when they did not have automotive things. So I learned horses, from people who knew horses like you would know cars and engines. That was something they passed on to us, which was just, when I look back, I think how blessed I was to learn horsemanship from people like that. Like I said, I didn't pick my parents, I'm here, but I'm the only one that really gravitated to the smell of a barn, good smell of horse flesh and manure, and it's about as bad as alcohol, it'll ruin you, But that's how I got into the business after them, and I think they all saw that I was heading that way and kept steering me that way. But so we did everything for a long time, but then the horse business just got dominant, and that's what we stuck with.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned a website a few minutes ago that had something about the history of Harlan.
Just harlinsdalefarm.com. Not plural farm, just singular farm, harlinsdalefarm.com.
Yeah.
You may have to actually type it in the browser. I started to go down the road of search engine optimization and ran out of steam. So the website was a thing that, yes, sir. I think it's important to follow up on your question, sir, and some of the stuff that Dad said. It was never really evident to me, I don't think, until he's got all the tax returns and everything from the 50s. Harlinsdale Farm, if you look at it now, you might look down there and be like, man, those people must have lived like this. This is not a Kentucky racehorse thoroughbred farm. It was not a privileged place to work. It was rough, it was dirty, and it was hard, and the farm, it provided a livelihood for probably anywhere from 8 to 12 people and their families, but the profit margins were slight, if at all. And so like my great grandfather and his brother Alex, the way they were able to purchase the farm in the first place was from things they had done completely in other businesses. So this was always to them a way to reclaim their heritage, that the way they grew up in Kentucky, and to raise their children that way, as opposed to the life of a national businessman. And so that's the way I was raised and he was raised. And so honestly ties into what we were trying to say with the book in general, which is, it was the hard work and the people that was valuable that they purchased with that. And that wasn't sold to the city. We still have that. And that was really what we wanted to say. And here's the other point. I'm grateful for them for securing that property, because it's still there. It's not a neighborhood. It's not a Whole Foods. It's not a Target. Which, find another place on earth. I travel for a living. You cannot find it. Find another town in America I don't even want to put a price on that land right there that the city could have for that. And it's yours. You can go there anytime you want. Well, I guess sunrise to sunset. Unless you want to buy a ticket to the pilgrimage. Yes, sir.
When we owned the farm, we always had our gates open. There never was anything locked up except the office, and if you really wanted to get in that, just walk around and open the window. But it was, the public enjoyed that farm long before it became a park. People would come down there, and we would do it on purpose. We'd put all the mares and the foals, new babies, in that first field. It was a traffic stopper. And people would come down there and pull up beside and eat their lunch, and try to entice, a foal to come up or whatever. But we had people that would come and just sit and hang out with us in the foyer there. Well, my grandfather was always there. It's perfectly northwest, east, and south hallways. There's always a breeze. He was always there with a big cigar. He lived almost 100 years old. And he would always be there philosophizing. Anybody want to sit down and talk to him? And so people would come, and they would just they move in among us and we wouldn't bother them, they wouldn't bother us. And so when they got ready to think about selling it, and there was a reason they had to, and I won't go into all that, my dad was really conflicted. In fact, you can find in USA Today where he said some nasty things about developers. I said, Dad, those people are my friends. I live here. Don't say things about developers. They're not bad people. Oh, I don't want them looking at my farm. They're running over here with helicopters and going over. I was like, okay, all right. But he didn't want to see it sold, and neither did I. And neither did anybody else from the family. And neither did most of you in the city. It was your farm before it was our farm. That farm has always been perpetually dirt that's been turned over since Franklin began. And so we didn't want to see it go. And so he got together with, where's our attorney? He's in here somewhere. Where is he? He's back there. Can you raise your hand? That's the man right there. They put us in a conservation easement. If it hadn't been for him, it'd be subdivision. Put in a conservation easement, it can't be anything but a passive park. 51% horse activity. My dad put that in there. No ball fields, no lights, other than the kind you take down at night. So that's why it's still a farm. And yes, he did get some money off of it, but not what he could have got. And I'm okay with that. Because I can still go there and don't have to do any work. My nephew said, "You missed this?" I said, well, that's debatable. When it's 100 degrees out there, I don't know, But I can still drive down there, and I can still go down memory lane. And Friends of Franklin Parks has given me a little space down there to give tours at the Hayes house. Whether they're true or not, they don't know. But I can tell my stories and sit and visit with people, and I get to go home.
It's perfect, Dad. Thank you. Any other questions? I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Just if anybody is interested, we did self-publish this. So if you want to hang out afterwards, if you're ever interested in do it, I made all the mistakes you can make, I think. But a lot of it, I think, was because, here I go, hold on. I assume it's like this. I know my father-in-law can attest to this with a painting. You don't want it to be over. There was a part where there was a story I started writing again on my computer somewhere. It was about like the finer mechanical points of shoveling horse manure. And I thought I could make it funny. And I was like, now I'm just trying to shove another story in the book. And I think it's done. But the working on it and working it with him I hadn't really spent much time with Dan Ford or talked to him in so many years. And so it was just that ability to go back and live those memories again, without them being painful or resentful. And so I spent a lot of time just on the production of it, because I just kind of didn't want it to be a project that was over. Probably could have done it a lot more effectively. But if anybody's ever interested, I can happily share with you the process we went through. I won't bore any of you with it here unless you have a specific question. Sorry. Yes, sir?
Tell us about the picture, the photo.
So if anybody's familiar with Robin Hood, the Franklin photographer, Dad, I have no actual memories of this day other than that picture. But he would come down on the farm a lot, and they would open the farm up to him whenever he wanted, really, to take pictures. I mean, honestly, anybody that wanted to come down there and take pictures. It wasn't like a contract you had to sign. Just don't get kicked by a horse, and sure, come on down. So he spent the day down there, and if you want to know the background, Dad obviously remembers it more than I do. That look on his face is genuine. He is not in a super good mood right now. It's probably, what month was this?
It's about like now.
Yeah.
And it's the end of a day.
Yeah.
And Faye had given me a clean shirt to put on, but I was ready to go home.
And so
And we walked that lane about 5 or 6 times.
And that's, I guess, is that Reno? Reno the dog?
Yep.
He's actually, my father-in-law helped me edit this. He's actually on the other side of the picture in real life. He's over here looking at us, but it didn't make sense for the cover. If you'll notice, Dad's got his keys on a keychain on the right side of his belt, and so do I, and his belt buckle and his boots. And, I don't know how much of this Robin had a stage, but that's pretty much what I remember. I mean, that's walking down that lane. You could walk that stretch right there. It's just past what we call the long barn, the white barn that's across from the arena. It's probably right about where my arm is right here. And there's that fence line right there going down to what we called the lower barn, even though it was northern on the property and higher in elevation, but we'll call it the lower barn and Oscar's barn. So we're walking south down the lane right there. Like Dad said, legitimately, this is not staged. I mean, he had worked a day at the farm with Robin popping around, asking him to restage a couple of pictures. So
Yeah, I told him that was the last one. Better get it.
I'm probably 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. Yeah.
Faye?
4 or 5.
Yeah. But our kids, that was their playground. All of them grew up there. And they have a harder time going back to the farm now. And it took me several years before I ever went back after they sold it. But my daughter went this last year and slipped in past the construction signs and everything else and went in. And she came home just, crying. She said, my farm's gone. And I said, oh, it's coming back. You just hang on. So
I personally don't think of it that way for what it's worth. I was saying this to Ashley, my wife, yesterday, even just driving through Brentwood. We moved away for 20 years. And so I got to see Franklin change in glimpses. And there were many years in there where it kind of, I don't want to drive past the farm. It'll make me mad. And just choosing to be resentful and bitter about it. Living here again and having seen so much of the country, I can tell you, this is a very special place, and I know it has changed. I know a lot of you might have moved here you brought the change with you. So sorry, but the people who've lived here as long as they do look at you and go, those people. I'm just kidding. But no, if you watched it change the way they did, or the way my older sister did, if you've been here the entire time, I know there's a little bit of Franklin's just not the same. But let me tell you, I've seen a lot of dying towns too, and so. I think for what it takes to keep a town as vibrant and alive as it is, I think they've done an amazing job. And I think that Harlinsdale is like the crown jewel over there. So I don't look at it that way anymore. From a material perspective, there's zero chance that barn would have fallen down. We would have never had the money
that's
to keep
why
it
we
up.
started Friends of Franklin Parks and raised the roofs. It started because of that, just to preserve the roof.
It would either have been sold as it would have fallen down and had been demolished, or just it'd be returned to the forest, because there's no way we could have maintained it. So realistically, there was no other better outcome for the farm, and that's the way I see it.
No, I agree totally. Yeah.
If I'll wrap it up there, or if there's any more questions, I'm happy to stick around. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think we read in the Herald about the Franklin Planning Commission meeting with a developer to buy some of Harlinsdale, and that meeting was postponed or canceled for the second time.
You're talking about my uncle.
August.
That's my Uncle Tom, who passed away. That's his old farm out there by TSC, Hillvale Lane, Target, out that way.
West of Winstead Hill.
That's my father's brother. That was their farm. It was a dairy farm out there, and they're talking about developing that and trying to get it whether annexed in the city or annexed into the county or whatever. But yes, it's being developed. But
That's independent of
one thing my family always practices very well is my business is my business and your business is your business, and the two don't intertwine. So I don't know what the situation is there. My cousin John and I are like this, but I don't ask him a lot of questions unless he wants to tell me. So I stay out of it, but it is, anytime you have something like that where something is being developed, we just sold a farm in College Grove, and we finally sold it just as a farm, because developing is not just an overnight process. It takes forever getting through approvals and making sure everything is environmentally sound. It's a big process. So, you know, this is all out for the public, but it should be where people can speak into it, and that we avoided all that.
But just to be clear,
When we
that
saw this
property, that's not an erosion of the charter or the conservatorship of Harlinsdale Park.
Has
That
nothing
is
to
a
do-
privately owned property owned by my great uncle Tom, now his son John, and
Yeah.
his kids. So that's totally a private transaction that has, it's not like we'll bend the rules here. That's still rock solid out there. That has nothing to do with that. That
Tom
makes you
was
sleep
one of
better.
those who was instrumental in putting the farm, the Harlinsdale Farm Park, into the conservation easement. And our mayor now, our governor now has that where you can do that with your farms. I know the Gentry Farm has gone into a conservatorship, and so conservation easement, excuse me, and so are some others. And I'm so glad because so many people would lose that flavor of rural life if we didn't have it.
And we thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had nothing to do with it. Like I said, I was just born here, and my father and my uncle did that. They didn't ask us our opinions. So I just woke up one day and they said, "Oh, by the way, we sold the farm." And I went, "Oh, interesting." So I'm here with you enjoying what they did, and we're standing on their shoulders. And we wanted to share that with you just through memories so it doesn't get lost. So.
Yes, ma'am.
We're one of the newcomers. We've been here about 10 years. We went out and I met Clay when we went through the farmhouse, which was really interesting. With that, I read the book and I really appreciated it. And so I'm one of those foreigners that are saying, this is a part of a heritage that you in the city can enjoy. I came from Minnesota, and from there, there's a Norwegian barn, so that I'm enjoying from my heritage and the classiness of that barn. I just want to encourage you to be up there, see the house if you haven't. It just was really enriching to me, and I so appreciate having that opportunity.
Thank you very much. And wait till you see that barn. When they get it open, it's going to be so unique. And it'll be an event space, but it looks like it's a barn still. You go in there, there's stalls, but you open them up, and they've done a super job. Yeah.
Did you say the barn is open now?
It'll open about August, Tori? 16th. So they say. We're hoping weather holds out, everything else. But our event will be in a big tent right beside it, which you can still buy tickets for. And then the barn itself will be used for part of that event. It's going to be super.
And on that note, like the Raise the Roof fundraiser, the Friends of Franklin Parks, is a separate cutout of donations that are designed to preserve the barn.
Well, to preserve the farm, and then we do connectivity of we have trails that go all the way around Franklin. Well, our goal is to connect Friends of Franklin Park, connect all those trails. And then we have there's other properties being bought that places need to be preserved that the park system's going to own. There's 1,000 acres. It costs $250,000 a year just to mow Harlinsdale. There's 1,000 acres in Franklin that are parks in the city. We're blessed. If you went through COVID, they saved my bacon, being able to get out and go walking around, not having, distance yourself from people and all that stuff. The park system here is wonderful. The people that run it are super. And because they trust Tori Barnhill and her staff here, they have allowed us to work side by side with them to raise private money to come along public funds to do the things that they cannot do with public funds because you got other things that need them. And so we've been able to partner with them, and they trust us. We took the project of the Hayes House that Tori did in the board, and they were able to restore that Hayes House because they gave us the lease for that land for us to do it with their supervision, where it took the barn 13 years. because it's under government-controlled bureaucracy. Not that I'm saying it's bad, it just takes longer. And so we were able to do the Hayes House in like 2 years. We did the barn next to it. We almost have the funds for the 2 little workhouses there, but we got LEG's Dream World that we've got $1 million in the bank. As soon as Ladd Park says go, it's going to be a special needs park. That's on the other side of Franklin. So we're doing things a lot of different. We put a bridge across. Thank goodness for the people in that subdivision. Chestnut Bend allow us to do that. We connected the trail so you can walk across that Harpeth River now, and you're right there at the park, and the farm. It's to me, it makes it all worth it. I get a little teary, and excuse it today, emotional, but I really love this city. And I just think what we're doing here, I hope if they'll keep a lid on it, don't tell anybody else about it, and just say, you know, make California more attractive or something, you know, because it's just my Faye and I raised our children, it's the most beautiful place. The people are wonderful. The people who shoulders I stand on, who grew up in Williamson County, made all this possible. The founding, the business, the aldermen and all the people in the past who had the foresight to put a circle around part of the historic part of the city and keep it from being changed. Mary Pierce, that's what I'm trying to think of. If you hadn't met Mary Pierce, she wanted to be here today. She's a stem winder. You know, well, Tori studied under her, so be careful. You know, they're going to preserve everything we can in this city and push it forward, and they're doing a wonderful job. And you know, ex-mayor's wife here. So you know, we got so many people that that made this environment possible. I went to school at BGA, this old campus. Okay, they preserved it. They made it into something else, but they didn't tear it down. And so I don't know. I just thank our city officials all the time. I even saw our governor walking down the streets of one of our festivals. And I just went up and shook his hand. I said, I'm just so fortunate to live here in this state. He lives here in Williamson County. But, you know, it's just, as my grandfather said, he traveled all over Europe one time with my grandmother. Came home, he said, there's not a prettier place in the world than Middle Tennessee. I believe him. I can't find one. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. You know, I used to preach.
No, I mean, I think this is.
And I don't get to at home. So.
We didn't write a book to sell books. We didn't write a book to self-aggrandize any of our story. It was because we wanted people 20 years from now not to look at that place and go, that'd be a nice spot for a neighborhood. And you put your pool house right there and your clubhouse and put your Publix over there. I want y'all to understand. We want everyone to live the story. So when you walk that place, you might actually say, oh, that's where that happened. And there's a history to it that involves something more than just land and horses. So if you do care to read it, it's mostly, I think it's funny. I think that I get choked up when I read it.
Well, there's one chapter in there, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
You'll get warned. If you're squeamish, don't read it. I'm telling you.
It's a breeding farm, okay?
Yeah.
We had to broach that subject. It's the elephant in the room. And so
I made it funny.
He did it so good.
If at anything, you get maybe a snapshot of what it was like to live down there, or work down there rather. But if you do want one, like I said, we didn't even plan ahead to think about selling books. There's only a few left at Landmark. The first 5 people who show up today can you'll make Eric Rotstadt regret his decision to send me an email saying I should come get my extra books, because I think he only has 5 left. Time, Past, and Present in the Factory has 6 of them, something like that.
And then
Or you can go to Amazon. So
Amazon, iBooks.
it makes no difference to us.
Barnes & Noble.
Get
If you
it.
get them on Amazon, they will not be signed unless you track them.
It's a true statement. It's a true statement.
Landmark and Times Past and Present are also.
Faye will be available later for her. She'll give out her address and you can come to there. Any other questions before we turn it over to give the room back to the library?
I just want to thank Ashley, your wife, because if it wasn't for her telling him, look, if you don't bring this to an end, I'm out of here.
That's true.
So we finally got it concluded.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.